Yer Blues is one of the most polarizing Beatles songs. It's a loud, dark, and gritty blues rock jam that understandably isn't among their most well-known hits. But it's also a fascinating Beatles song for a number of reasons that I'll cover in this episode. I'll take you through the song's unique recording history and highlight some of its quirks, anomalies, and even a mystery or two. As a fair warning, once I point them out, you can't unhear this.
Girl, you know the reason why.
Yer Blues resides on the second half of the Beatles' monumental 1968 self-titled album, more commonly known as the White Album. The song was written by John Lennon during the group's visit to Rishikesh, India, in early 1968, a fruitful trip that inspired many of the songs that would wind up on the White Album. John first recorded Yer Blues as an acoustic demo at George Harrison's home in May 1968.
Yes, I'm lonely.
By the summer, the four Beatles were back at EMI Studios in London to transform their latest batch of demos into finished songs. On the evening of August 13, 1968, the band turned their attention to John's new song, Yer Blues. But instead of recording in the familiar space of EMI's legendary Studio 2, they wanted a different sort of sound, something more raw and unpolished to fit the song's heavy blues style. According to former EMI engineer Ken Scott, John noticed a small storage room adjoining the studio, which had been recently cleared out. John apparently first joked and then seriously suggested that they try recording in there instead. So imagine this scene, all four Beatles and their gear packed into an 8x15-foot equipment closet. As Ken Scott later recalled, if one of them turned and swung his guitar, he'd hit someone else in the head. The unconventional session in Tiny Room 2A featured their conventional lineup. John on rhythm electric guitar, George on lead guitar, Paul on bass, and Ringo on drums. The band played through 14 lively takes. For the final backing track, they chose the fifth full take, which was actually labeled Take 6 due to a false start between takes 3 and 4. George then overdubbed a new guitar solo. There's a neat little anomaly here. If you listen closely to the final song, you can hear faint remnants of another guitar solo, likely picked up by nearby microphones during the recording of the backing track. On the next day, August 14th, John recorded his final lead vocal as an overdub onto the existing track.
If I ain't dead already, woo, girl, you know the reason why.
But there's something weird here too. In the section after the solo, you can hear John singing, but this time it sounds like he's in another room. You're actually hearing John's initial guide vocal from the first day's session, picked up by the nearby instrument microphones, like the ghost guitar solo was. But there's an even crazier oddity about this section. It's actually a direct copy of the beginning of the song, minus John's final vocal overdub. For whatever reason, the band didn't want to use the song's original ending, which was first heard by fans in 2018 on the White Album Deluxe Edition. Instead, they had the EMI engineers copy the first minute of the backing track and splice it onto the master tape midway through George's guitar solo. Here's how the original section sounded before they made the edit. And then, in the final version, you can clearly hear the abrupt cut back to the beginning at around 3 minutes 17 seconds. The opening part then runs for another minute or so, fading out slowly. A clever little studio trick. The second day's session included one more subtle addition. During the guitar solo section, Ringo overdubbed an extra drum part. Why? First, it sounds cool. Listen carefully at around 2 minutes 25 seconds. And second, to help cover up the abrupt edit at 3:17. Studio magic at work. Finally, on August 20th, John and Ringo spent a quick half-hour session working on the memorable count-in heard on the final mix. There's a bit of debate online over who is actually doing the count-in, but to my ears, it's Ringo. With the recording complete, the next step was to add some finishing touches. An effect called ADT, or artificial double tracking, was applied generously to the guitar parts. Here's how they sound without the effect. And here's with ADT applied. John's final vocals were also treated with some sweetening, in this case a bit of slapback echo, to reinforce the feeling of a live, on-stage performance.
Feel so suicidal, just like Mr. Jones.
With that, Yer Blues was complete, and it was mixed for both single-channel mono and two-channel stereo, with a few slight variations, notably the final fade-out, which inexplicably runs longer on the mono version. Yer Blues was placed on side 3 of the White Album and released to the world in late November 1968. Among fans, there's a pretty sharp divide between appreciation of Yer Blues and outright dislike. I do feel there's undeniably a special quality to the song that deserves more attention than it often receives, and that's largely in the production itself. What sounds like a simple live jam by a local garage band was in reality the result of thoughtful, deliberate creative choices in the studio, from selecting a unique recording space to tinkering with overdubbing, special effects, and other engineering magic. As usual, the Beatles, along with their team of devoted personnel, including producer George Martin and engineer Ken Scott, made the end result sound almost effortless, masking the ingenuity that went into its creation in this pre-digital age. By packing into tiny room 2A, they summoned the raw spirit of their early days, playing in loud, dingy clubs in Hamburg and Liverpool. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the Yer Blues session took place almost exactly 5 years after their last show at the Cavern Club. The White Album has a reputation of being a portrait of a band drifting apart, a collage of individual compositions recorded mostly in isolation. And that's partly true. But songs like Yer Blues stand out as clear exceptions to that narrative. It's easy to see how intimate, raw, and exciting moments like the Yer Blues session planted the seeds for the Get Back project, which they would kick off a few months later as a structured journey to return to their roots as a live band.
Back to where you once belonged.
Not surprisingly, John and the other Beatles have spoken very fondly of their memories of Yer Blues. Ringo has cited it as one of his favorite performances and that, quote, "You can't top it." John liked it so much that he performed the song live twice, although outside of the Beatles. First at the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus in December 1968, backed by an all-star lineup of fellow rock icons.
I'm lonely.
Yer Blues was also included in his set at the 1969 Toronto Rock and Roll Festival, joined by Eric Clapton on guitar and longtime Beatles friend Klaus Voormann on bass. In sum, Yer Blues is an unconventional Beatles song that deserves more attention than it typically receives. They were clearly emulating, and some might say parodying, the British blues scene that was in vogue at the time. But in their typical Beatles fashion, they also used it as a vehicle to show off their talent, confidence, and pleasure in exploring new musical territory. They'd also go heavy with songs like Helter Skelter and I Want You, She's So Heavy. But Yer Blues is by far the most fun. Lyrics aside.
Yeah, wanna die.
Varying between your blues and your comedy.
So what do you think of Yer Blues? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for subscribing and thanks for listening.